Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning at Export TT's session on adapting for post-COVID exports to Canada and the EU. Just a quick reminder to please keep your microphones muted and your cameras deactivated. Without any further ado, I'll get into our session and introduce our first presenter. Ms. Vashti Guyadeen, Chief Executive Officer, Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Services Industries, has more than 20 years experience in research and development, policy design, SME development, global and institutional competitiveness, and international relations. She is currently a member of the National Quality Council of Trinidad and Tobago. Prior to joining the TTCSI, Vashti worked in academia, public and private sector, including the Arthur Lockjack Global School of Business, Trinidad and Tobago Chamber of Industry and Commerce, Economic Development Board, Trinidad and Tobago International Financial Center, and Ministries of Energy and Public Administration. She spearheaded several projects with international development agencies, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, UNICLAC, and the World Bank, and has a proven track record of developing research products that enable the business community to make well-informed decisions. Vashti holds a first degree in history, master's in international relations, history, and a postgraduate diploma in promotion of financial markets. She recently obtained a certificate in cluster development of the European Union Foundation for Cluster Excellence and Competitiveness Company. Vashti has been charged with the responsibility of repositioning and rebranding the TTCSI into a research entity. So, without any further ado, I now hand you over to Vashti. Vashti, if you're speaking, we are unable to hear you. You may need to unmute your mic.
Oh, sorry. Good morning, everybody. I'm sorry about that. For those of you that don't know about the TTCSI, we are part of a Caribbean network of CSIs that were established as a result of a CARICOM mandate in 2006. The TTCSI is the representative body for associations within the national services sector, currently representing 56 associations with a combined membership of approximately 663,000 companies and persons. This morning, since I am getting the ball rolling, I will start with, I'll focus on a state of play of the industry. Then I'll move to look at the trade and services policy, and I'll give you some snapshots into the TTCSI's National Services Exporters Survey. And we conclude with looking at some rising stars. So what's the state of play of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago? The energy sector, without a doubt, accounted for 67% of real gross domestic product on average from the period 2014 to 2018. Revised real GDP data in 2019, according to the Review of the Economy, indicates that real GDP decreased in 2018. So let's look at performance by sector, specifically services. Commercial services, which includes all services activity except public administration and utilities, accounted for 49% of GDP in 2018. Trade and repairs accounted for 36% of commercial services in 2018. In 2015, commercial services were responsible for 68% of the economic growth. The key service activities contributing to 2015 growth in commercial services were trade and repairs, administrative and support services, which experienced growth of 36% in 2015. The manufacture of petroleum-related products such as LNG, crude oil, ammonia constitute most of the manufacturing sector's contribution to GDP, which was 75% in 2018. The food, beverage, and tobacco products subsector was the best performing category with growth of 10% and 6% in 2016 and 2018 respectively. This was, however, interrupted by a 12% decline in 2017. So let's look closely at the energy sector here. The energy sector accounted for 72% of exports of goods and services. In 2016, Trinidad and Tobago had its first current account deficit since 1998. So, what can we say about the state of the economy? Now, I'm using, my basis is the National Trade Policy, which is an excellent document. If you have not read that, you need to go to the Ministry of Trade's website and have a look at that. This policy was released in 2019. One of the key findings from this study was that this country's exports, on average, are far too specialized in a few products when compared to the world average, or even with other small island economy states. Now, this is very important to note. And let's drill a little deeper into this finding. This, in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen, points out why we are having the current foreign exchange crisis that we are having. We would see between the period of 2000 to 2018, trade with our comparative advantage, trade with the US, we had a comparative advantage of 98 products. That fell by 57 products to 41 products over 18 years. In terms of trade with Canada, we had a comparative advantage in 2005, 84 products. That fell by 51 products. 10 years later to 33 products. The same has happened with the EU. So what we have seen is that our comparative advantage with these specialized products have been falling. And bear in mind, this is just products. We do not have data for services. Services constitute 2/3 of the world's economy and are the fastest growing component of world trade. It's the core drivers of economic growth, without a doubt, employment and development in every part of the world. So let's drill a little deeper onto the trade and services side, again based on the National Trade Policy, which highlighted that the services sector is a nexus for growth for Trinidad and Tobago in the next decade or so. So if it is the nexus for growth, we need to prioritize the services policy. This has been in the making for over 5 years. So we need to get that policy done and get the action plan ready. Post-COVID, there are a number of opportunities for services, specifically modes of supply. I would not get into the different modes of supply. Michelle Hostel will cover, that's her expertise. She will cover it in her presentation. What I want to share with you is that given this deficiency in services data, the TTCSI embarked on an ambitious project last year with PSIP funding and the support of the Ministry of Trade, something called the National Services Exporters Registry. This project was contracted to the Arthur Lubjack Global School of Business. It was concluded, phase 1 was concluded on May 25th of this year. And the study undertook where we surveyed service providers and firms in 6 sectors. These sectors were business and professional services, creative industries, educational services, energy services, ICT, and tourism services. The data collected through this investigation provides us with a baseline outlook into potential areas of diversification. I'm now going to share with you, now this is the first time that this information is being publicly available. Later on this month, the TTCSI and Lubjack will have a release of the results. So let's look at some of the main key findings in terms of exports from this report. The main findings demonstrated that over the period 2017 to 2018, other, energy, and ICT were the highest earning service-based sectors, but fashion, tourism, creative industries, and business and professional services were the only sectors that reported growth from 2017 onwards. With respect to export activity, the services sector had a multiplier effect in its ability to attract diverse markets. Key export markets for local services were the United States, Barbados, and Guyana. The main, Michelle, this should be of note to you. The main modes of supply were mode 1, cross-border trade, and mode 4, movement of natural persons. The local services sector also,
okay.
The local services sector also contributed to a high share of GDP. The highest level of GDP came from sectors identified as ICT, fashion. However, the highest dollar value came from ICT and energy services. Backward international linkages also exist between local service exporters, as they had a large pool of their suppliers located in North America and this country. There was a synergistic relationship between exporters and their partners, for instance, customers and suppliers. However, this was not the case for exporters and their supporting agency. This is something that we need to focus on, both TTCSI and Export TT. Now, let's look at some of the barriers. And this is, again, this is the key barriers that were pointed out from the exporters as well as the potential exporters. The main challenges, I'll focus on the latter, where you see from 7% go down. The main challenges to exporting identified by the exporters were access to international markets and access to capital. We have had this issue with access to capital, particularly with the creative industries. Non-exporters indicated that they face many obstacles, namely lack of awareness of how to utilize trade agreements, regulatory barriers, and generally basic information on how to export. Again, there's some work that both CSI and Export TT should be undertaken following the study. Now, as I indicated, there are some rising stars for us. Definitely the priority sectors that we have identified is business and professional services, creative industries, energy services, ICT, tourism. On the secondary, these are supportive services, educational services, financial, construction, and related services, health and social services. Now, I wish I had drawn some line here to show that there are linkages. These sectors are no longer operating in a silo. So there is a collaboration, there's backward linkage with tourism, the creative industries. These sectors, in closing, these sectors are expected to be the foundation for the next wave of industrial development, thereby driving employment, export, and foreign exchange growth for Trinidad and Tobago over the next 2 decades. So it is critical to point out that these sectors are at different stages of development, which means that different strategies, policies, and interventions will be necessary to propel growth. That's the end of my presentation. I would now hand over to Michelle Hustler.
Thank you so much, Vashti, for all that information. And yes, we're now going on to our second presenter, and that would be Ms. Michelle Hustler. Michelle is a trade and business development specialist and has obtained her designation as a certified international trade professional. She has worked in trade and small business development in the Caribbean and beyond over the past 17 years, with a particular emphasis on services sector development. Began a professional career as manager of the Barbados Coalition of Services Industries from 2003 to 2010, where she worked to improve the international competitiveness of the Barbados services sector, with an emphasis on encouraging services exports. In 2011, Michelle began work as an independent consultant. Her main areas of specialty are export development and promotion, business development, institutional strengthening of PSD organizations, and marketing and communications. She has undertaken work in 30 countries across the world, working directly and indirectly for many international organizations, as well as many private sector organizations. Michelle has supported the development of national services sector strategies for Eswatini, Swaziland, and St. Lucia. She has supported comprehensive export acceleration programs in Costa Rica and Colombia. And she has developed and delivered export readiness training across the region and in many other countries, including Ukraine and Bangladesh. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to Michelle. I would also ask to remind participants to please kindly mute all your microphones, and your questions can be put in the chat area and will be addressed at the end of the session. Michelle, over to you.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you for the introduction. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I take it that's a yes. So I'm going to talk about the impact of COVID-19 on the services sector. But before I do, I have to get a bit technical and take a step back. And we're going to start with the start. What is a service? So a service is an idea or an action developed using resources, skills, ingenuity, and experience. Essentially, it's any help one person or company can offer another person or company, and typically in exchange for financial compensation. So there's different characteristics of a service, and the one probably most people are familiar with will be intangibility. That means you can't hold a service in your hand and you can't examine a service. But the one that I want to focus on today is physical proximity. So whether supplied nationally or whether supplied internationally, service transactions often require physical proximity between the service provider and the service consumer. So bear that in mind as we go on. So what is a service export? A service export is a service provided by a resident of one country to a resident of another country, regardless of where the service takes place or where payment is made. And Vashti mentioned this in her presentation, and I'm going to quickly go over this because this is important. The World Trade Organization has established that there's 4 ways of trading services, 4 modes of services delivery. And I'm going to quickly go through each one of them. So the first one is mode 1, called cross-border supply. And you'll see on the left-hand side, the service consumer, he's a gentleman with a yellow tie, and the service provider is the gentleman in the green tie. So in mode 1, only the service travels across the border. And this is typically done over the internet. So an example might be animation services provided from one country to another. The next one is consumption abroad, and this is when the service consumer comes to the place of the service provider. And this is often, tourism is a great example. Mode 3 is commercial presence. It's when the service provider establishes an office in the country of the service consumer. And a good example might be hotel chains. And lastly, mode 4, it's movement of natural persons. It's when the service provider travels to the country of the service consumer on a short-term basis to provide a service. Now, why is that important? Let me get into this now. According to the WTO, services trade may be the component of world trade most directly affected by COVID-19 through the imposition of transport and travel restrictions and the closure of many retail and hospital. So in 2017, services trade was about 13.3 trillion. 60% of services trade was mode 3. And if you remember, mode 3 is when you set up a business in another country. 10% was mode 2 globally. That's tourism, for example, when the service consumer comes to another country. And 3% was mode 4. And that's when the service provider goes to another country. So you'll see that 73% is mode 3 globally, is mode 3, 2, 3, and 4. It's predicted that half of mode 3 services will be stalled due to the pandemic. And mode 2 and mode 4, because of travel restrictions, those are stopped. So that accounts for over 50% trade right now that's going to be affected. Mode 1 is also affected because mode 1 often serves businesses providing services in the other sectors. So they might provide services to the manufacturing sector or might provide services to other service providers who have been affected by the global pandemic. So some regions will be affected more than others. And if you look at this chart here, you'll see that the Caribbean, mode 2 is our highest. Almost 40% of the services that we export are via mode 2. That's tourism mainly, and that's been stopped. You'll see a little bit of mode 4, that's probably 6%, and 28% or so via mode 3, which, as we know, 60% of that is affected. So services trade will be significantly affected, and what can we do to try to remedy this? And the first one is sell your services online. Excuse me one sec. There's lots of ways to sell your services online, and I want to take a moment, if everybody could, to quickly in the chat box type in the most creative way you've seen services being offered online in your country or in Trinidad since the global pandemic has started. Now, for example, I'm going to give you some examples of creative ways services can be offered online. And I noticed yesterday I'm part of a Facebook group called Caribbean Recipes. And there's 135,000 members on that group. And a lot of them ask questions about how to cook certain Caribbean food. And it is a good opportunity for a lot of chefs who may be unemployed right now or underemployed right now to maybe offer cooking classes online. I know that the gym that I typically go to, Surfside Wellness Center, is now offering digital memberships, meaning you could tap into on-demand or live classes. There's 80 classes being offered every month, as well as online workshops on various topical subjects. One of the services that I recently purchased online was online decorating services. So I provided them with the dimensions of a room, and they laid out, how the room might look based on some of the input that I gave them. Yesterday, I'm building something in my son's bedroom. It's a little bit complicated, and I wanted the advice of a carpenter. And I checked online to see if there were any online carpentry services that I could just call somebody and say, Skype somebody or WhatsApp somebody and say, here's what I'm doing. How should I do this better? And there's no services like that that exist. So there's an opportunity, and that could go in any trade or in any service. So it's about being creative. Now, a good place to start with being creative is on freelance marketplaces. I've purchased many services on freelance marketplaces: logo design, graphic design, having images done that I needed to have done, website cleaning services, like I said, interior design. I've had a lot of work done. There's many different types of freelance marketplaces, and the good thing about freelance marketplaces is they provide you with a big customer pool to start with. It's a good way to start building your international portfolio, and a good way to start testing the waters with online provision of services. So freelance marketplaces include business to business, and this one that I've referenced here is for attorneys providing services to other attorneys. There's also business to consumer. You might be familiar with House, which is a online, again, interior decorating and architectural type service. There's customer to customer, like Skillshare. They could be high value, like Upwork, or low value, like TaskRabbit. TaskRabbit provides services like setting up your IKEA furniture, for example. IKEA has partnered with TaskRabbit to do that. They could be generalized, like Freelancer, or they could be niche focused with just a particular service like Doctor on Demand. So it's a good idea to start by looking to see which freelance marketplaces are relevant to your service, and to think about how you might sell your services through these markets. Now, value chains is another consideration. A value chain refers to a range of activities that brings a good or a service from conception to customer. A global value chain refers to a value chain whose activities are spread across international borders. And for the most part, these are services. So this might be a typical value chain: product development to manufacturing to distribution to sales to after-sales services. And you'll see all the various services that are needed to go into each of these stages. Now, global value chains have come about because of the declining cost in transportation. That's in reference mainly to goods, but also the advances to ICT technologies. And it enables each of the links to specialize and offer a very specific service and a very high quality services. Often they're sourced to countries where there's lower labor costs, or that have other competitive advantages, meaning that the country's developed capacity in one area or another. If you were interested in being part of a global value chain, you would need to change your model to a business-to-business type model. Another important thing to do, and I've noticed in working in the Caribbean, that services, we often don't specialize because of the limit available. We often will state that we're experts in a large range of, which might be a deterrent to those looking to purchase very specific services. So meaning specialize on what you're really, really good at, and find ways of offering these services to businesses. Now, mode 5.
Hi.
Services
My
are
dad,
not
you.
as important as Deborah, I think your microphone is on. Sorry.
Ewart. E-W-A-R-T. It's pronounced Ewart.
Oh, somebody's
Yeah.
microphone is on.
Hi, excuse me.
Yeah.
Can all participants please ensure that their mics are muted?
Because my kids are in homeschool. We've been. Yes, that could work. Yeah.
Michelle, you may
Yes, okay.
have to mute. You may have to mute the mics as the host. Thank you.
Push not till then.
Okay.
There's nothing before
See if I
then.
can do this.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to do that.
Well, I know what it used to be like. I know the appointments have gotten easier, but I know probably not during this time.
Okay,
Right,
let's talk about mode 5. Mode 5 is when the GATS accounts for 4 modes, as we talked about. It doesn't account for the supply services embedded within goods.
Okay.
This is a kind of
Because when I
newer
spoke to him yesterday, he had said that he was going to try and see him at the same time we're coming to use the endo laser.
Hi, Janice.
Monday.
Janice Derrick.
So we'd be there on Monday, the 29th.
Call her on her cell phone, Deborah.
At 2 p.m. Well, a 2 p.m. appointment is what we have for the endo laser. 2 p.m.
There we go. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. I lost a little bit of my train of thought, but we're talking about mode 5 now, another way of providing services in the global pandemic context. And that is, mode 5 is when domestic inputs of services are exported via goods. It's adding value to the manufacturing and the agricultural sector in one's own country, and these goods are eventually exported. And this is now being considered as mode 5 services, services that are embodied in goods. Which kind of leads to the next slide, which is on strategic alliances. But you could establish a partnership with a manufacturing company or maybe an agro-processing company in your country that may need extra support in order to be able to export or to add value to their exports in order to charge more. The strategic alliances. A strategic alliance is a cooperative arrangement between 2 or more independent firms with a common set of objectives in order to gain mutual economic gain. Now, there's benefits to directly exporting, of course, meaning you have control of your service, but the quickest and the cheapest and the easiest and the most successful way for a service provider to export is through a strategic alliance with somebody in the target country. Right now, in this current climate, an alliance with someone in your target market can serve as a strategic tool for interfacing with customers in the market when you might be unable to do so because of travel restrictions that are in place. And lastly, if you're not able to export services via any of these suggestions, the last one is to prepare for the new normal. And for a lot of people in the tourism sector, this is going to be the road you need to take. And Michelle is going to cover a lot of this, but I'm going to talk about one, and that's the customer. It all begins and ends with your customer, right? So many generational attitudes have been tied to events of the past, and these have left permanent imprints. So think about, how people behaved after the Depression and how they've shopped and how they used things in their home, and think about how people behaved after maybe World War II and how the customer changed from before those events. The customer is likely to change because of COVID-19 too. So first of all, purchasing behavior has obviously changed. People are purchasing online, and the use of technology has increased in a much quicker trend than the way it was heading before COVID-19. And there's ways that you could implement these behavioral characteristics or these change in customer behavior in the services you're offering. So for example, in use of technology, online scheduling is something a service provider can call my hairdresser, who I'm looking at our office next door, to get an appointment. It often goes like, are you available Monday afternoon? And she says, no, not Monday afternoon. I say, well, how about Tuesday morning? No. When are you available? Thursday at 1. Oh, that doesn't work for me. So the use of online scheduling might be a good tool to adopt. Spending power will have changed. People will have less money to spend after COVID-19. It will take a long time for things to get back to normal, if it ever does, but also attitudes towards spending have changed. Maybe people are going to look to spend less on frivolous purchases or purchases that they once considered frivolous. Perhaps they're going to be saving for the rainy day, the next rainy day that comes along. Perceptions regarding health and safety, especially if you're in tourism or in the wellness sector or the health sector, those perceptions, safety and sanitation, are not going to go back to the way they were. You're going to have to step up your game. There's a lot of resources available online that can help you to what the expectations are going to be post COVID-19 and once travel resumes. And values have changed. People are going to want to continue to spend more time with their family. They're going to want to have more meaningful experiences. Tourism might not look the same way. People might want to stay for longer and engage more with the country that they're visiting. So these are all things to keep in mind when you're preparing for the post-COVID-19 context. I want to just quickly check out to see if there were any comments about the really creative services that are being offered. I stopped sharing my screen. I wanted to read some of those. Oh, nobody had anything. Well, if you do have anything, please share. If there's any creative ways of offering services online that you've seen in Trinidad and Tobago, I'd like to know about those. It's always good to share. So please do. And in the interim, I'm going to pass you back to Deborah, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thank you so much, Michelle. Yes, we've had no comments so far, but we do expect some questions shortly. That being said, I'd now like to introduce our next presenter, also called Michelle Lau Chutang. Michelle Lau Chutang is the founder and managing director of Inveni Business and Technology Limited, the Caribbean's leading China sourcing solutions company. She's the founder and principal consultant at LCT Consulting and Associates Limited, a boutique marketing and business development firm founded in 2012. An expert in the field of marketing and business development strategy, Michelle is a management consultant, entrepreneur, business mentor, and a trainer. Her professional experience spans several industries, including travel and tourism, manufacturing, printing and packaging, consulting, consumer goods, government enterprise development, and 15 years in the financial services industry. Additionally, she has held senior executive management positions at state companies. She's the holder of an MBA with a major in international marketing from the Arthur Lock Jack School of Business, University of the West Indies, and a BA in international business administration from the University of Lincoln, United Kingdom. Michelle's passion lies in mentoring businesses and helping clients to achieve goals they initially deemed impossible. She believes that our most valuable offering is helping others, and paying it forward leads to your own success. Ms. Lau Chutang is the president of Quota International of Trinidad and Tobago, the local arm of global non-profit Quota International, and currently holds the position of Director of Communications on the board of the Association of Female Executives of Trinidad and Tobago Limited. And with that, I will now hand you over to Michelle Lau Chutang. Michelle, your mic is muted. Hi, Michelle, are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. Apologies. Thank you so much, Deborah. I appreciate the introduction, and it is really great to be speaking with everyone on the webinar today. So basically, I think the entrepreneur among the group of presenters, and I'm very, very happy to be presenting on improving your online presence. And we will take just a short spin around actually refining your business model. Right. So just to look at what we'll be talking about during the session, we're going to take a snapshot view of the current COVID-19 environment as it pertains to an online perspective. And then we are going to deep dive into improving your online presence utilizing these online tools. So looking at email, social media, website, your website, e-commerce, ordering online, Google and Google AdWords. And as I said before, we would look at improving your business model utilizing these three areas here. Okay, in terms of the current environment online, and Michelle Hustler alluded to this in her presentation, we are operating in a different environment. We're basically transitioning out of COVID-19 at this juncture. And the statistics that have been coming through is that nearly half of global consumers say they will not return to shops for some time or a long time after the lockdown or restrictions have eased up. And we are focusing today on Canada and on the EU. So I have just put some information here as it pertains to Canada, and then we will get to not necessarily the EU, but for the UK, because it's a bit difficult in terms of getting research information. So if we look at the Canadian environment as it pertains to online shopping, the research revealed that Canada is at its tipping point as it pertains to online sales. And this is data that was collected as at April 30th, 2020. The report really breaks down COVID-19 impact on the Canadian market, and it looked strategically at certain sectors. So you're seeing where the increases are. At 105% in terms of sporting goods, 106% in terms of furniture and home decor, food and restaurants, and you can see appliances, electronics, building materials, and so on. Apparel shows the slowest growth at 21% in the Canadian market, but there was an uptick when you look at the UK market. Going on into the next slide. So as I said, Canada is at its digital tipping point. If you're going to be looking at Canada as a possible export market, doing business online, as Michelle alluded to in her presentation as well, with consumer behavior changing, you have to have an online presence, and a very good one. At this juncture, no longer are consumers going to be concerned with a static website that you haven't updated in a very long time, and we're going to get into some of the specifics as it pertains to that. So online traffic has been growing. Merchants who had 20% or more revenues coming from e-commerce in the Canadian market before the crisis started, has just added e-commerce as part of their business model in terms of generating revenue and the companies being profitable. So it's very, very strong. I mean, we had nothing to do during the stay-at-home order, and we are coming out and transitioning out of that as governments around the world ease up on restrictions. So again, whether it's Canada, locally, regionally, or internationally, having an improved online presence and having an online presence at all is very, very important in terms of you surviving COVID as well as going beyond in terms of success. All right, so let's take a look. Everyone very much aware of Amazon. Amazon is the online platform where you get everything. I assume right now they are not actually selling humans, but Amazon sales went up first quarter. They just announced Q1 results, 26% year on year from 2019 in terms of sales. At some point during between March and April of this year, as we were getting into April, Amazon had to just stop in terms of selling certain items. They just had to focus on essentials because they did not have the capacity to run full scale as they normally do because of the surge in global shopping and shopping online. They actually hired over 175,000 staff, new staff members between the end of March and the first 2 weeks of April. So that is just to give you a global picture as to what is happening in terms of the online market right now. In terms of the UK, what it is I've seen in terms of the research is telling us that 2 in 5 UK shoppers are saying that they will make more online purchases after the lockdown ends. So you think about it, if you are looking to get into the EU, the UK being outside now in terms of Brexit, but to give you an indication, everywhere persons would be looking to continue that online shopping habit that they would have created or basically ramped up during the lockdown period. It's not going to change. It's going to take some time before a vaccine is found for the coronavirus, and we are going to be very, very cautious in terms of venturing into actual physical brick and mortar stores where all the protocols and health and hygiene protocols need to be in place. We're going to be thinking about our safety, and we will continue to purchase online. Social media, and we're going to be talking a bit about that just now, but just to give you an idea on how this whole thing has exploded. Facebook daily active users increased by 11% year on year. And I don't know if you have heard of TikTok. TikTok is a video app that has just exponentially just taken over all of the other social media apps that are out there. If you are in the restaurant business, in the food business in any way, even as it pertains to tourism destinations, any kind of product base, even for services, even though I haven't seen any data to confirm that, but I know in terms of product services, product-based products, actually, you are seeing a lot of uptick in terms of the use of TikTok. To actually as another medium in terms of reach for consumers. Yes, and of course, mobile. Mobile reaches 51% share of total display and impressions. That is the amount of ads when you have your mobile phone, it's coming across, the impressions are on the phone and it's being recognized and it's being counted at the end of the day. So if you're doing any form of advertising for your products and services, you would want to ensure that whatever medium that you're using, whatever platform that is, that it's mobile friendly, it's ready, because it's, customers, the public is utilizing their mobile phones more than anything else at this juncture. Yeah. So in speaking to Deborah prior to today's webinar, I wanted to get an understanding in terms of the makeup of the persons who had registered. And there were 2 industries that really stood out. One was fashion and the other one was the cocoa chocolate making industry. So, and I said to myself, I said, let's be real in terms of the offerings that we are putting out with respect to this webinar. And in doing some research and talking to some of my friends within the industry, I said, yes, everyone is experiencing some level of downturn. You have economic losses across the board, but there are things that you can do virtually to ensure that your brand remain relevant, to ensure that you are able to generate some level of income. And what I found, I saw that all of the different fashion weeks that happen across the world is normally in person, but the first virtual Shanghai Fashion Week was held. I believe it was in April of this year. And it was actually put together within over a 6-week period. And you had hundreds of designers coming together. And it was, as I said, a virtual marketplace, right? The biggest marketplace for live streaming was done. And of course, it was happening in China. So if it's happening in China, you will want to actually have some sort of alliance with Alibaba and Tobago and Tmall in order for you to, to really do everything on such a grand scale and have the kind of impact that you want to have globally. Now, in terms of doing something like this, what you have found is that the market has expanded, because normally for Fashion Week, it is, a certain amount of persons who are there viewing the fashions, and then the rest of the world wait for it to be launched online or you know, in the magazines and all of that, and then eventually to land in the stores. But here you have it, everything online, hundreds and thousands of people have the opportunity to view all of the latest designs coming through. And not the best part about it is that the organizers worked synergistically with the international designers that I understand were from 100 different design houses across the world. Certainly something to think about as it pertains to our local fashion industry going forward. And then let's look at the revenues in terms of what is taking place with fashion globally and online. So you found that in April month, there was a 20% higher percentage versus year on year from last year. But in terms of the other countries, as I said before, while in Canada, the apparel sector, which is not just apparel, it showed that there was a decline by 21%. In Australia, New Zealand, Germany, and the UK, they have seen particularly strong results, while countries like Sweden, who we know have not handled the pandemic very well, they have experienced a decline. So if you're looking at these markets, as I said again, you need to be doing your research. You need to understand, you know, what is happening in those markets, and start talking to the other fashion designers and see, you know, what we can come up with in order for us to compete and ensure that we're able to earn revenue during this period. So let's move on now as it pertains to the chocolate industry. So small chocolate businesses should be focusing on online sale channels now more than ever. And this includes increasing digital marketing efforts to drive sales. Very, very important. I saw a study where it said, you know, 70% of the small chocolate makers actually saw a decrease in revenue by 50% between the months of March to April 30th. And chocolatiers all over the world are looking for different ways in which they can generate revenue, keep their heads above water, and basically survive what is happening as it pertains to the pandemic. Yeah, so the decrease in sales is haunting everyone. However, I'm not sure how many of our local operators would have seen that there was a virtual global chocolate festival that was held during March 24th and 28th, where you had chocolatiers coming together from all over the world to try and keep their businesses going, and they hosted what you call a stay home with chocolate global festival. And what it incorporated was live demonstrations using Instagram, where they were able to show the behind the scenes of chocolate making, just as if you would take an agritourism tour at an estate, and at the end of it, you taste the chocolate. They were able to actually conduct that live tastings were done, a lot of education, in terms of the chocolate making process, and they also got persons to understand the supply chain that is involved in terms of chocolate making. At the end of all of that, what they went even further to do, that website that was developed, stayhomewithchocolate.com, is a website that still exists right now and will be for some time, because what they are doing is utilizing that website now. The chocolatiers are utilizing that website to actually do have videos and do presentations and webinars and live tastings to place online on this particular website. And what they're also doing is encouraging persons to purchase the chocolates to keep the small business bean to bar producers in business at the end of the day. So you are learning, and you also have an opportunity to contribute, to the development of the chocolatiers, and profitably so. So again, as you can see, yes, it's online initiatives and it's being done individually, but in both scenarios between fashion and chocolate, you are seeing where it takes a coming together of the different players within the industry to make it work. And clearly this is an approach that should be adopted, and I'm sure in some quarters it may have already been done in terms of the industry players getting together to have a cooperative response as it relates to, you know, transitioning and, as I said, surviving and eventually thriving as it pertains to the pandemic, because it's going to take us some time before we actually are on sure footing as it relates to you know, not even returning to what was, but trying to adapt to the next normal as we move forward. We cannot do it on our own. Okay, so this brings us now to the section that treats with improving your online presence. And generally, having an online presence is another very important step as it pertains to exporting. Without one, companies will not be able to find you. Even if they could, a potential customer is unlikely to trust a foreign customer that does not have an online presence. I know for me, if I'm approached by anyone and I myself am looking to do business with anyone, the first place that I visit is LinkedIn. I need to go to LinkedIn to see once you have a LinkedIn page, and from there, I would look online to see your company page, because I need to get some understanding of who you are and what your business is about. And I'm most likely going to, in some way, possibly judge your business based on what it is I see, the information that is coming forth, how often that page is the information there, is it very dated, you know, that sort of thing. So having an online presence is very important, and the online presence does not include just your website, it's all of your social media accounts and any pages that come up with your business or name that when it's Googled. Yes, so very important. So let's now look at email. And sometimes as business owners, some of us utilize the generic free emails. However, it's important when you're conducting business, and more so in markets that are developed, that you have a professional email. And you go even one step further to separate your personal and your company email accounts. Yes, a business email helps you to boost credibility, and it also supports your brand awareness. It's very easy right now to purchase a domain or a business email. You can get one on GoDaddy.com. There's millions of sites. All you have to do is type that into Google, and you're going to get some information in terms of you purchasing an email address. In terms of social media, which is another useful online tool, and we all have our own personal social media, pages that we use to connect with family and friends, and so. And as I said before, we need to differentiate, our business pages as it pertains to social media versus our personal. You do not use your personal social media pages for business, for engaging with your customers. Yes. Sometimes, depending on your social media page and depending on the market that you are targeting, a social media page may be enough. In some developed markets, you would need both. And so you need a social media in conjunction with a website, right? So whoever that potential business partner is, they see how you interact with your customers as well. And socially interacting is a different, medium. You interact differently with customers on your social media page because it's all about connection versus, the kind of information that you're going to be placing on your website that pertains to your product, pertains to your call to action, how to get in contact with you, and information about the company and so on. It is very, very important now that you have established these pages that you update those media platforms frequently and post frequently. You have to be consistent. Again, as I said before, ensure your social media platform is relevant to your product and to your target customer. Sometimes, yes, Facebook is utilized quite a lot, but having an Instagram account, let's say you are in the restaurant business, you would want to show pictures of your food. If you're in fashion, you want to show pictures of your designs and so on. So it works. Now, even including a YouTube channel to provide information, whether it's from an infomercial, if you want to think all the way back there, just having videos is another medium in which that you can use, speak with your customers. And all of this is about speaking to your customers internationally, not just locally and regionally. It's from an international market. All of this is online presence at a global level. So you have to take care of it. You cannot be a business person and you are not on LinkedIn. You have to establish a LinkedIn account. Yeah, and again, I would reiterate, keep your personal and company accounts separate. Yes, that can make you or break you, as they say in local parlance. You really need to be very corporate and very professional in terms of when you're on your social media pages. And as you need to engage, engagement increases. You need to engage with your customers, and you can use now videos and photos. I spoke about TikTok before. We have Instagram, they have IGTV on Instagram, you have Facebook Live. There's so many different avenues available now within the social media platforms that affords you the opportunity to keep your brand alive. And gives you a voice that you can use for differentiating yourself among your competitors. Yes, if you do not know how, then you need to get the kind of assistance that you need in order to make it work for you. One challenge of utilizing social media is the limits of organic reach. And that is very true in terms of Facebook. I saw where, and I've experienced this myself in terms of running sponsored ads on Facebook to advertise my services. A couple years ago, it was pretty easy for you to have a business page on Facebook, and you're able to reach your customers. And that is just organically, just in terms of growth. You send it out to all of your friends on your list, and they would like your business page and whatever it is. Now it's very, very hard for you to get, the kind of followers that you need. So in order to do that, you can invest. It's an investment. In terms of having a budget for advertising and what we call sponsored ads on the platform. Yes, and once you advertise on Facebook, it's also posted on Instagram as well. Yes, so there are other platforms, of course, that caters to your targeted advertising. So you can have some research. So let's talk about your website. A simple website from online platforms such as WordPress, Wix, Shopify, or Squarespace are available. A lot of persons utilize WordPress. It's pretty easy. As well as Wix. I've seen companies utilize Wix as well. And most of the times, if you're now starting out, these are pretty good to use, especially Wix. But as the company grows and it gets more dynamic, and so you may want to branch off into something a bit more concrete. But with these particular websites, it gives you an online presence almost immediately. You don't need any special IT skills. It's pretty basic. With WordPress, there are thousands upon thousands of templates that you can choose from various industries. So you can actually get online right away. Yes, just, you have to craft some content, make sure the content is in line with the company's products and its services, and you should be okay and ready to go within a day or two. Yes, and you are developing your website from a buyer's perspective in terms of what you have to see your website through the eyes of the customer. You're not developing your website for you. You're developing your website for existing and potential customers. So put yourself in their shoes as you would, you craft the content and utilizing the specific visuals and so for the website to get it up and running. Well, if it's already up and running and you need now to ensure, especially now, again, from a pandemic perspective, that, as I said, that it has been updated and it's, all relevant information is there. If you had a static website before and you are selling products, then now is a good time for you to ensure that you have an e-commerce interface attached to that website, so you can now do online sales through your website. Ensure as well that you have your call to action is very visible. It's very user-friendly. So that you can get the attention of your customers. They would like to get more information. It's pretty easy to reach out to you. And of course, your follow-up is very important as well. Yes, and then again, with a website, you want to ensure that it is mobile friendly. When you look at the websites on a laptop versus when you're looking at it on your phone, you want to be able to see the entire landing page of the website. You don't want to have to be scrolling around to see half and half. Yeah, so that's not what you're looking for. So you're going to have to look at all of those things. Include your certifications, licensings, awards, if you have testimonials from customers and so on your website as well. Yes, that gives you, it enhances your credibility. And of course, and we're looking at the export markets, you know, potential buyers and so of your products, looking at to see, you know, what you're about, what you're doing. It would be good to see, you know, those things on there. Yes. Now, creating an online store or an e-commerce store for your inventory, yes, it's a worthy investment. And right now, being in that stay-at-home situation and that with the lockdown order, it has, you know, the cost has been, you know, reduced significantly. Yeah, so I know during the stay-at-home order, very early on, you know, there were even web developers who were offering to produce a website for you for free, and you had a couple months in which you can, you know, you can make that payment to them. So, and again, you still have the option in terms of doing it for free. But however, whichever way you decide to go, you have to keep these things in mind, in that you want to have a professional site. It must be aesthetically pleasing, as well as the content is rich, and it keeps the viewer, the customer that has logged on to that website engaged. Yes, from beginning to end. So you want to have to write informative and comprehensive product descriptions. You want to use high quality photography and videos. You want to add your, as we said before, your testimonials, and any other you know, certifications and that sort of thing on the website. You need to indicate your payment methods. Very important. In Trinidad and Tobago, we do have some issues as it pertains to the plugins that we will have to put on these e-commerce websites. Everyone knows about PayPal, yes, but now we have the introduction of WePay, which is another payment method that we can utilize. And so far for the SME market, it seems to be working pretty well. I have just commissioned the website for our NGO, and that is a payment solution that we would be adopting for the website. Yes, do your research as stated here as it pertains to your payment options for your site, because getting paid obviously is one of the biggest obstacles, but then why go through all of that in terms of preparing the website and then you're unable to get paid? That makes no sense. So ensure that that is part of your discussions with your web developer, or if you're doing it yourself, keep it top of the mind and do proper research. I just mentioned that we can have the PayPal button installed on your website in terms of receiving payments for your products and services, as well as WePay. Check out WePay Caribbean. They were launched in Jamaica last year. They are in Barbados. They're all over the region right now. And again, it seems to be very, how should I say it? It seems to be a reasonable cost in terms of the merchant fees attached for implementing the WePay plugin on your website. And it just, you know, it seems to be favored above PayPal at this juncture. So really take a good look at it. You can visit, as I said, WePayCaribbean.com. So another thing that you would need to do is look at improving your online presence. Some of us update your profile on Google My Business. Google My Business is very simple. You just put in Google My Business, you check and you see what comes up. If you're supposed to have a Google My Business account, and it will have information about where you're located, that will be able to generate Google Maps. It will have a profile of the company. It will have information about yourself if it's so desired. Yes, so you can, and it connects you across in terms of the Google search when persons are searching for your company. Also, again, you can look at improving your online presence utilizing Google AdWords. It's a bit costly, and I don't have the time to get into all of the SEO, but you really, when you do a search on Google, you want to be in the first top 3 in terms of ranking. And there is, so that is normally, you pay for that via PPC online, but it is worth it. And there are companies that if you put in keywords, it utilizes keywords. So if you put in keywords such as cocoa and Trinidad, you would realize that in the top 3 or top 4 on that first page, you're going to find companies like Cocoa Republic, Trinidad and Tobago, Fine Cocoa Company, and so on. So they're already in that ranking on that first page. From a services perspective, again, you can offer virtual consultations and free services, especially in terms of what's happening now with regard to, for us in this pandemic situation. Let your customers know what your services are, how you're able to operate. A lot of professional services in terms of doctors and attorneys and so on are doing, they have those services as well. Even for my company, it is something that we are all also offering from a consulting perspective. If you have, again, in the food business, you can look at offering free delivery, curbside pickup, and other services that matches or surpasses your competitors. What the competitor offering is all about. But the most important thing here is about meeting your customers' needs. Michelle, in her presentation, mentioned about the changing consumer behavior patterns as it pertains to, as we move out of COVID. Those patterns are going to be here for a while in terms of, there's not going to be that much disposable income in the market. Everybody is going to be, be against you in terms of, how am I going to be spending this money? So whatever you're putting out there and however you're communicating with your customers is going to be very, very important. Yeah. So I'm coming now to the last 3 areas. As it pertains to to improving your business model, and we sort of touch on some of those already. So I just wanted to look at it. So we said embrace the digital way, and we have spoken quite a bit about improving your online presence. And this is just really about you, taking into consideration, can I deliver my product or service electronically to my customers at this juncture? You're primarily a brick and mortar site, but you want to be able to offer your service electronically. Deepen your loyalty with your existing customers. I was speaking to at least 3 small business persons recently, and because of the shock that they, in terms of COVID, and the business just sort of flatlined, and they had to basically catch themselves, they did not really communicate with their customers, which was a very, very poor sign, because now we are transitioning out. You are now going to be, reaching back out to those customers. Who knows, maybe they have already, gone on to your competitor. But in terms of how you communicate with your customers, you need to keep that top of the mind. You need to be real, you need to be authentic, and you need to be transparent about your efforts to serve your customers in the best way that you can, and let them know that you are there to support them. Let them also know, communicate to them in terms of what you have put in place as it pertains to doing business with your company at this juncture, whether it's online, whether it's in store, should you have the opportunity to be operating in store once again. Maintain a strong relationships with your clients, utilizing different mediums. You have email marketing, you have newsletters, again, your social media platforms, and your websites. Explore the benefits of collaboration. And this is my last slide. If you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, you need to go together. And we saw that in the 2 scenarios, the 2 examples that I had between the fashion, in terms of the fashion industry and the chocolate industry. The objective of collaboration can be new ideas, exploring synergies, and creating new business partnerships where 1 + 1 = 5. You alone within your industry at the moment may not be able to save your business, but you and understanding that there are that your competitors are going through the same pains that you are, you may be able to come together as a collaborative to make some changes to impact your business going forward, but you're doing it collectively. But we need to start the conversation, and don't be afraid to do that. Partnerships can help give you access to new customers, new products, and new markets. It will also, in most instances, help you generate revenue for your business, be able to cut costs. Yes, because now the costs and expenses are spread among many as opposed to just yourself. So it keeps you afloat, you can survive and eventually thrive and be a success once more. So believe in your business as you take the next step and as you get ready now with respect to the new markets that we'll be looking at, both Canada and the EU. So thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation for today. Let me just hand you over back to Deborah.
Wow.
Wow.
That was a lot of information that we just got there from our first 3 presenters, giving you information on how the goods and the services companies and industries can work together to continue building. That being said, we're now on to our final presenter who will give us some information after you've built your business. Where can you sell your product or your service? Mr. Christian Siviere, following a 30-year career in international logistics in Europe and in Canada, Mr. Siviere started a Montreal-based import-export consultancy in 2010, Solimpex, active in 2 areas: personalized consulting and coaching to help import and export SMEs grow internationally, and training on the logistics, customs, and regulatory aspects of international trade, importing, exporting, free trade agreements, supply chain management, and related issues. Christian is a subject matter expert and lectures for CIFFA, the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association in Toronto, and for FIATA, the World Freight Forwarders Association in Zurich. Christian conducts seminars and webinars for various trade organizations, including the Montreal Chamber of Commerce, Supply Chain Canada, the EU Delegation to Canada, the Trade Facilitation Office, Invest in Ottawa, and of course now added to his portfolio, Export TT Limited, Trinidad. He also publishes articles in Inside Logistics and Supply Professional magazines. It is indeed my pleasure to now hand you over to Christian.
Thank you very much, Deborah, and good morning to all, and congratulations to our previous panelists who delivered excellent, very insightful presentations. I feel somehow I'm going to need to have some Trinidadian chocolate in order to be able to reach the same level of energy that they were able to deliver. So welcome everyone. I have the privilege of being the last speaker, so I hope that everyone is still with us. We're going to talk about the exporting to Canada and the European Union markets. And I have a lot to say, but not that much time to tell you all that I have to say. So I'll try to proceed quickly through the presentation I prepared for you so that we have time for questions at the end. And so who I am has already been, I was already introduced by Deborah, so thank you very much for that. So to give us a perspective, an idea of the kinds of markets we're talking about, here this slide summarizes the respective position of these countries and entities. So we see the EU without the UK is the 3rd largest GDP in the world. With the UK, if we add the 2.5% of the UK, it would be the largest, but without the UK, with Brexit, it falls back to 3rd position. Canada is relatively minor compared to these huge entities. However, it's still a very interesting market. We have a population of about 37 million. And I would say the Canadian market, if you could say on the one hand, the EU is huge and is very diverse, you could say Canada is also an interesting market because of its openness. Canada is open for business. People are open-minded, well-educated, and so it makes it an interesting market to explore. And I hope that you will do so very soon. So before talking about the EU and Canada, and the presentation of the EU will be a little bit bigger because it's a bigger entity. Just a couple of points I'd like to touch on, since we're talking about exports, we're talking about expanding, discovering new markets. So we have a pandemic, everybody knows about that. And one of the effect or one of the consequences of that is that you started to see companies declaring force majeure, which means it's a legal term that basically gives you the opportunity to get out of your obligations, get out of your contract. So you may have heard some customers invoke force majeure, or some suppliers or some service providers. And so the important thing here in this context is that the pandemic was declared on March 11. So as a result, you cannot invoke force majeure on any contract signed after March 11, because after March 11, the situation was known. And so the thought it brings to us here, or what it should entice us to do, is to look at our contracts closely for all our future dealings. Look at our contractual clauses, get help from specialists in order to have good clauses in our contracts that protect us, that make it possible for us to get out of our obligations should something unexpected and irresistible like the pandemic, like the COVID-19 happen in the future. So a good reminder for us to look at our contractual clauses when we want to export overseas. And the second thing I wanted to bring to your attention, we're talking about general things that are as valid for exporting to the EU, Canada, or anywhere in the world. The second element is Incoterms. Everybody knows Incoterms a little bit, and you probably know that it's an important element of international trade, but it's a good opportunity, today is a good opportunity to really learn more about the Incoterms and update ourselves. They are updated every 10 years. A new version just came out on January 1st this year. Incoterms define the responsibilities and the cost sharing between seller and buyer, but they also define the sharing of risks. And so depending on the Incoterm you use can have a big impact on success or failure in an export venture. Let's take an example. Let's say the situation was so bad in Italy at the beginning of the pandemic that some ports were closed. So let's say if you had goods on their way to Italy and they could not be discharged at an Italian port, so they'd have to go elsewhere, which involves a lot of additional costs. And so what does that have to do with the Incoterm? Well, depending on the Incoterm that you used, these costs may be your costs or they may be your customer's costs. So you see, this is one of the things that Incoterms define, is where the risks lie, and in which instances the risks are on the seller's shoulder and in which instances the risks are on the buyer's shoulder. So a very important issue to revisit in the context of expanding our export markets. Very briefly now, a couple of definitions. We're going to move to Europe first, and then we'll move to Canada last. All I want to say about this is that it's also to clarify, because sometimes some of these acronyms can be potentially misleading or can be confusing. So there is an entity in Europe called the European Free Trade Association, and it is not the European Union. It's a group of countries that are European, but that are not part of the European Union. So just to clarify, if you want to develop business in Switzerland or Norway, it's great, but they are not part of the EU. It's a different entity. It's called the European Free Trade Association. So just to clarify that, the EU is an entity, a group of 28 countries that have unified a lot of processes, a lot of activities, a lot of economic activities. Today, the UK is still in the EU until the end of this year. So today we still have 28 countries, or we could say technically 27, but the UK is actually operating as if it was in the EU until the end of the year. And so it's a huge market, very diverse. That's an important component of that, and an important element of that. And let me reassure you, if you're concerned about the UK leaving the EU, if you're concerned about languages, you might say to yourself, oh my goodness, if I want to start developing business in the European Union, when the UK leaves, I'm going to have to learn Polish or Romanian or Italian or French or Spanish or Flemish. No, let me reassure you, one of the 27 members of the European Union is the Republic of Ireland, and the official language of Ireland is English. So the good news is that even when the UK leaves, English will still be one of the official languages of the European Union. Another thing that is sometimes potentially confusing, and we hear about the Eurozone. Now, the Eurozone is a group of 19 countries that have decided to use the same currency. So it's like a sub-assembly or a subgroup within the EU. And it's interesting to know that, because some of these countries, of course, would be happy to work with euros, and this may have to be reflected in the price list or the quotation that you might make in these to these customers located in these countries, in these 19 European Union countries. So the great advantage of the European Union for us exporters, for us Caribbean exporters, is that it's a customs union, which means that anything that you ship to the European Union, whichever port or airport it arrives at, there's a single process to clear it through customs, to get it through the port or the airport, and then it has what's called free movement of goods in all of the 28 countries. So, and soon to be 27 countries. So it doesn't matter where in the EU you go through customs, you only go through customs once, and then your goods are free to travel within all these countries without any borders, any formalities at all. This is not sad. Actually, I show it on purpose because it's to highlight also the fact that the European Union uses the same customs process in all 27 countries, or all 28 countries, soon to be 27. The same process is used in all these countries. It's the same document. It's the same importer number that is valid for all these countries. So that is makes it a lot easier very easy to deal with that entity as far as customs issues are concerned. A very nice tool that's available to us is the TARIC consultation portal, which would enable you to check, first of all, if there's any duties payable, any tariffs on the product that you're wanting to sell in the EU and ship in the EU, but it would also it will also give you information on import restrictions, import measures, regulations that apply to that product. So it's linked to the HS code of the product, of your product. And it's a very nice tool. And why I'm able to say that, in fact, is because Canada does not have as powerful a tool. If you look for customs and regulations and import measures in Canada, you have to go through different sites actually to get to it, whereas the EU has a very neat site with the TARIC tool. So it's an interesting one to know about and to become familiar with. Now, what could be a strategy to sell in the EU, to develop markets in the EU, would be to sell DDP. So here now we're back to the Incoterms that we talked about a little while ago. And what's neat is that in the European Union, you can be what's called a non-resident importer. You don't necessarily need to have an importer, a European importer or distributor. You can do that yourself from the distance. Now you might ask me, but do I need to have a subsidiary or a branch office in the EU? And I would say no, you don't. What you need is a fiscal representative who would be able to manage for you the tax requirements, particularly with the VAT. So in what situations could that be interesting? Well, let's say you're a cosmetic producer, or the world famous Trinidadian chocolate. Let's say you're connected with the buyers at a supermarket chain or a chain of gourmet stores in France, and the people from Carrefour, or in Germany it would be Aldi, or in Spain it could be El Corte Inglés. So if you somehow connected with these people, you would be able to sell to them directly without having to go through an importer or distributor. You could distribute directly yourself. So it's a pretty neat feature that is available in the EU. It's also available in Canada. So you could have your stock in a distribution center in the European Union and deal directly with a chain of retailers, a chain of supermarkets, or gourmet shops anywhere in Europe. And so I just wanted to share with you here in this context a couple of slides of results of surveys that were done as to where would a distribution center be best located in Europe. This is a pre-Brexit slide, so we have to cut off the UK, of course. The UK won't be an interesting distribution center to have for continental Europe. So they all point to the same thing: the north of France, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, the south of Germany. This is where the core area is for European-wide distribution. Another interesting feature that is available in the European Union is the fact that you can protect your IP directly with one filing. And so, and it's also a good reminder that it's something important when you start exporting, or when you want to develop more export sales, more export market, you want to grow. Protecting your IP is extremely important. Protecting your brand, your image, your logo, and so filings through the European Union Intellectual Property Office, which is located in Alicante, Spain, you file once and you're protected in all 28 countries currently, and or 27 countries when the UK leaves. So an interesting tool to have. And then I know some of you are interested in the service industry, and this is why I had a little slide on that. I wanted to share with you the information, give you a hint on the information you can get on something called TED, the Tenders Electronic Daily. It's a very interesting portal that where all public tenders are listed. All public tenders of the European Union are compulsorily automatically listed on this portal, and they could be EU-wide tenders, or they could be country tenders at the country level, at the individual country level. They could be at the municipal level, at the regional level. They are always listed. They have to be listed on this portal. And so what could that be? What could be of interest to us? Well, the direct interest would be if we are trying to bid on some government contracts in the EU, at whichever level it is. That's where we would find the information available on which contracts are up for bid. And so if you're directly interested in that, it's a very good tool to know about and to use. But indirectly, what it can provide us is a great source of information as to which companies are active in these service industries for government procurement, because you get to find out which tenders have been awarded to who. And Michel was talking a moment ago of how it's important it is to team up, to partner with companies in the countries that we want to do business in. And so that's a great example. If you're interested in municipal services, and you can go and look for what public tenders have been issued, and you can find out which companies have gotten the work, the business, the project. And so it's a great tool to find out what is available in that respect, but also to find out who the big players are, or who the players are, and discover some potential partners for you, actually. So that's a very interesting tool if you're in the service industry, I feel. And Michel talked about the online presence and how important it is, and that was a great presentation and a great insight into that. And it's very true that we have to get used to doing more things in line, just like what we're doing this morning, in fact. So with that comes a few responsibilities. And so one thing, if you start doing business with the EU or in the EU or with EU customers, European Union customers, you have to make yourself familiarize yourself with the GDPR regulations, which just came out in 2016. They have an extraterritoriality element, in a sense that your company does not have to be located in the EU. Even if you're located in Trinidad and Tobago, as soon as you interact with a European-based customer, then you're bound by the GDPR rules and regulations. So something to be familiar with, make yourself familiar with these regulations, and they revolve mainly around privacy, respecting the privacy of customers. And so be mindful of that. The penalties, if you're found to be an infraction against the GDPR rules, are quite hefty. and they're potentially based on turnover. So and not so that's an element to include in your development strategy and make sure that you're in conformity with these regulations, these GDPR regulations. So as all of you know, or most of you know, we have a huge advantage as Caribbean exporters. We have this EPA with the European Union, which is has been in effect since 2008, which greatly helps us do business there. Why? Because, well, there's a lot of assistance available, a lot of exchanges with different organizations, and also there's a reduction of customs duties and tariffs on, I think, most of our products, actually. So it's a great tool to capitalize on and to keep in mind. So what is happening? What is the status right now? What's the post-COVID picture of in the European Union? I would say, thankfully, most European Union countries are gradually coming out of the pandemic. The countries that have been the most affected are moving out of it slower than the others, of course. So Italy was the most affected country for some time. The UK was slow in responding and in taking measures of confinement and social distancing. So they, in the meantime, became the biggest, the most affected country in Europe. Spain were quite affected as well. Not as much as Italy, but quite a lot. And Belgium is a small country, but percentage-wise, they were quite badly affected. And so what's happening today is that all these economies are trying to move out of confinement, try to start their economy again. The ones that were able to do that early was Germany, Austria, and Denmark. So they have a slight advantage, if you want so, over some other countries, because they restarted their economies a little bit sooner, a bit earlier. A huge feature of the economic situation in the EU, but I guess it's the same in many countries around the world, is there's been a lot of government money poured into economic activities in order to help them come out of the pandemic. The biggest bailouts have been for airlines. The biggest package was for Lufthansa, the German airline, so that's a feature of the situation today. Of course, we have to follow that closely so that to determine if the partners we're going to want to work with are in financially sound situation, with this pandemic. So one issue that is sort of poisoning the situation a little bit, or the atmosphere in Europe right now, is the Brexit scenario, which everybody has heard of it. The British people, by a narrow margin, voted in favor of leaving the European Union after 40 years of membership. The UK decided to be an island again. And so there are discussions at the moment between the EU authorities and the UK as to find a way to leave the EU in an orderly fashion. These discussions are not going that well at the moment. So it could be that if the situation improves, there'll be a smooth exit, but it could also be that there might be a messy exit. So it's a little bit hard to tell how it's going to go, which way it's going to go. So that'll have a big economic impact no matter what. So if the exit from the EU is smooth, it will have less impact. If the exit is a little bit more messy, then it will disrupt trade flows in and out of the UK. It will have a big impact on investment. It has already started. Many companies have stopped investing in the UK, particularly the automobile industry. It'll be a time-consuming, costly process to recreate all kinds of laws and regulations that were basically done by the EU until now. So the UK will have to recreate its legislation in order to have legal basis for doing things in the UK, and it's going to have to renegotiate new trade agreements. So there's discussions with the US, there's discussions with Canada. Will will the UK have an equivalent to the EPA that we currently have with the European Union? Well, this is what we will see. And so it'll be interesting to see if we can come to a similar type of agreement with the UK. What has come out so far on the UK side, and that will end my the part on the UK, and then we'll get into Canada, is that the UK has unilaterally decided to cut tariffs on many goods, which is a little bit of an odd thing. Usually you don't do that ahead of time. You keep that in reserve to use that during negotiations with other countries, but they have decided, we have a populist government in the UK, so they've decided to do this unilaterally. So it will create opportunities for exporters because trade barriers and tariffs and duties are being lowered on many products. So that could be something to look into. What products are going to be, on what products is the UK reducing duties and tariffs unilaterally. So opportunity for exporters potentially here. The Canadian market is very different in a sense that it's a huge market geographically. The territory of Canada is bigger than the territory of the EU, but we are much smaller in population. And but one thing that's a little bit similar, and as far as the organization of the country, is that we have regional differences. Also, we have provincial provinces that have big powers, that have a lot of power. And in the context of the COVID-19 crisis, even though the federal government deals with federal laws and with defense and foreign relations, as far as the economy is concerned, it's each province that decides which industries are considered essential, which industries are in lockdown, and which industries are coming out of lockdown. So we have differences across Canada depending on the province you're dealing with. And so that's something to keep in mind for you exporters, business people from Trinidad and Tobago when you want to attack the Canadian markets, is that there'll be regional differences depending on the province that you want to start developing business with at first, at least when you begin. This map I have here just to highlight the fact that we are really a huge country stretching from east to west by 6,000 kilometers. However, the population of Canada is very thinly also stretching, and it's stretching from east to west along the U.S. border. Most Canadians, the huge majority of Canadians, live within an hour or two of the U.S. border. So it gives it gives us different challenges from, let's say, from a distribution point of view, from a logistics point of view. If your market is in Ontario and Quebec, it's relatively easy. You'd use the port of Montreal or the airport of Toronto. But if you have customers in Western Canada, the distribution costs will be quite important, will have quite an impact on your bottom line because it's so far away and it is relatively costly to move goods from east to west, from coast to coast within Canada. So it's one of the considerations when you attack the Canadian market is see where your market is geographically and select the right port of entry, the right airport, and then build from there. And if you start developing in Ontario, for example, and then as a second step, you want to start developing business in BC, which is a few thousand kilometers away, you may have to have a little distribution center in BC as well, because it might be costly to move goods from Ontario to individual BC customers. The highest density from a distribution, from an industrial point of view, as well as a customer base is in what we call the Quebec to Windsor corridor. So Quebec City to the east and Windsor just across from Detroit in Ontario. So that's where the core of business activity is, and that's where distribution will be more efficient, faster, and less costly than if you start moving to further Canadian destinations. So what has happened prior to COVID-19, we had a rail blockade, which actually had quite an impact on the Canadian supply chain, because for most of the month of February, we had disruptive rail service. And in fact, we had almost no rail service for some time. And so as you can imagine, we just talked about how far it is. If you have products in Ontario and Quebec and you want to deliver them in Alberta or British Columbia, then you depend on the rail system. So we had this odd situation where our supply chain was very disrupted just before the pandemic. You see, that rail blockade ended on March 5, and the pandemic was declared on March 11, if you remember. So that had quite an impact on Canada. So in a way, we were almost kind of in a crisis mode before the COVID-19 erupted. To give you a snapshot of what it looks like in Canada as far as the current crisis is concerned, we have a relatively good management of the situation. We have proportionally far less cases than the US or the UK. Oddly enough, and for some reason that I can't explain, Quebec has which represents only about a sixth or a fifth of the Canadian population, has more than half of the COVID infections in the country. So it's very much affected. And by far the first province to be affected. Ontario comes next. So something to keep in mind, we have this slight disadvantage in Quebec right now, that we are more affected by the pandemic than, let's say, Ontario or Alberta or British Columbia. Probably has something to do with the management of it, I'm sure. And so where are we? Where is Canadian trade at the moment? I wanted to share with you these statistics. I don't want to bore you with all these figures, and I'm sorry if I do, but I wanted to share them with you simply because it just came out last week. And so they highlight, they illustrate how trade has been affected by the pandemic. When we looked at the March figures, there were slight reductions of, let's say, 5%. March, we were in the middle of it or at the beginning of it, and it had not affected trade as much as in April. In April, you can see right away from these figures, our exports fell by 30%, almost 30%. Our imports were down by 25%. So it was quite a huge impact, as is illustrated in the graph that you see. The graph at the top shows, jumping from the cliff's edge, actually. So we expect that May will also be quite bad, but we expect that a small rebound was probably starting to be perceived in May, and we expect things to pick up in June, of course. And so what I wanted to highlight here with this slide again is how businesses are affected, how activities are affected, and it varies. The measures that we have in place vary by province. So in Ontario, the Ontario government announced the phase 2 of the reopening of the economy, and that is going to take place this Friday. So more businesses will be able to open, more companies will be able to work more or less normally. So far, all we had operating were essential services, which were mainly health, communication, and transportation. And so each province manages that. So things are a little different in Quebec, they're a little different in Ontario, they're a little different in BC. To give you an example, garden centers, which is a favorite activity of Canadians in spring. When we come out of our winter, we're into spring, so we want to buy plants and flowers. So garden centers were open in Quebec about a month ago already, and in Ontario they only opened 10 days ago. So each province has its measures, and it's important for you to know that, because depending on whether you're going to exploring the Toronto market first, or the Montreal market, or the Vancouver potential business for you in these areas. So you'll have to you may have, if you start doing business here and you want to develop there, you may have slight differences in approaches and also in timeline for having being able to do business there. And so the great tool that we have in Canada for Caribbean exporters, particularly from Trinidad and Tobago, but all Caribbean Commonwealth countries, is that we have this mini free trade agreements whereby most products coming into Canada duty-free. And how do exporters demonstrate that or prove that? Well, it's either by supplying a certificate of origin or an exporter's statement of origin. So this is just for information. All I want to relay here is that there's tariff advantages for Caribbean, and it's relatively easy to administer and to get that through customs. And to end my presentation, because we are would like to have as much time as possible for questions, I want to share this with you. This last slide with you refers to the fact that the NAFTA agreement, which links Canada, the United States, and Mexico together since 1994, has been renegotiated, and there's been some questions as to whether the new agreement was going to come soon. And in fact, it's been decided 3 months ago that the new agreement would be in effect on July 1st. So it's very good news for Canada in general. July 1st is going to be the national holiday of Canada, so we'll celebrate that, but we will also celebrate the new free trade agreement with the US and Mexico. Why? Because we do so much business in the US and we depend so much on the US market. So anything that works well in that direction is good news for the Canadian economy in general. And so that's what I wanted to share with you at the moment. It's a very positive note, a very positive impact. And why do I say that? Is because a while ago, this new trade agreement was being in danger of being canceled by the US president. So we're really very relieved that that this is coming through. It's a big news, good news for the Canadian economy, and so we're therefore in a better position, in a more positive position, and I hope that we can that this can be help you develop business in Canada in the near future. So thank you all very much for your attention. I'm sorry if I took a little bit long, and but I'm glad that we still have a good 10 minutes for questions. So I'll hand it over to Deborah. Thank you all for your attention.
There you go. Thank you so much, Christian. Thank you so much to all our presenters. I don't see any questions in the chat area. That is, we ask that you put your questions if you have any. Michelle Hustler, when you had asked if there were any comments, there was one comment. Michelle, I've participated in a yoga session being offered from Trinidad and Tobago to various countries, as well as we've already seen an increase in new apps being launched for services. That's Michelle Hustler.
Thank you. That's
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yes, those were the comments that were made. Do we have any questions from anyone, or was our presentation so succinct that it gave you all the information that you needed? Will the presentation be available after? Yes, it will. It will be available online. And all our presenters, of course, are available to answer any questions that you have. Our presenters are consultants who are experts in their respective areas.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you very much, Deborah. Indeed. And please, everyone, remember there's no silly questions, you know, there's no stupid questions. So don't worry, feel free. There's only silly answers, no silly questions. So please don't hesitate.
We have a question here for Vashti. Well, or any other presenter willing to respond. I'm a professional services provider in the area of organizational development and transformation facilitation. Does your organization provide any assistance and or information that enhances access to potential Canadian clients?
Should I go, or anybody else want to take it?
Well,
no, go right ahead, Vashti.
Okay. First off, do you belong to any association?
All right, because
no, not presently.
Okay, so if you do, give me send me an email so I can put you onto an association, and once that I'll put you into an association that is a member of the TTCSI, so then we can start collaborating.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I must admit that I'll get your contact information through Deborah.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have another question. In terms of services sector, what does Trinidad and Tobago export to Canada? I think that question looks at what types of services do we export to Canada?
Okay, well, as I stated earlier, we are now in the process of collecting the services data. But right now, what we have data on is on the product side. And as you can see where I show that we have lost our comparative advantage, but now the major products that we are exporting are organic chemicals, natural gas, and fertilizers. On the services side, what we have been seeing is that an increase in business and professional services, whereby consultants, architects, that type of professional services, they are wanting to do more business with Canada. And TTCSI is in the process. We have held numerous talks with the Trade Commissioner out of the Canadian High Commission to see how we can actually implement some type of agreements to facilitate ongoing trade. So that is definitely in the cards.
Thank you, Vashti. I hope that answered your question, sir. We have a question for Christian. Do you need a permit to export oil and gas training services via video conferencing tools to Canada? If so, where do I start my research?
Oh, that's a very, specific questions. I honestly don't know offhand. I mean, training services online, I think that are pretty open, and I think that offhand it's probably okay. It's probably feasible. That would be something that would have to be checked into more in depth. But offhand, I would say yes, it should be possible, as long as it doesn't go beyond training as such. Would you deliver any kind of accreditation, for example? So I guess that could be something. If you deliver an accreditation, then we'd have to check into it precisely whether you can indeed do that, whether it's acceptable on the Canadian side.
And I think the question was specific to the oil and gas.
Oil and gas, yes, that's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The same question was asked in regards to the UK and European markets. What products or services are exported from Trinidad and Tobago to the UK and Europe?
So I'm afraid I don't really have that much information on that, on Trinidadian exports.
Vashti, I see you were trying to answer. Yeah? Vashti, your mic is muted. We're not hearing it.
Oh, sorry. On the TNT export side to the EU, it's basically food and beverage and energy products. On the services side, it's we have seen again the business and professional and the creative industries.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and question to everyone, withholding tax arrangements in place regarding Trinidad and Tobago and Canada? I guess that's you, Christian.
Well, do we have I guess the question would be, do we have a tax agreement? And I must say, I must confess, I don't know. It's something that can easily be checked, whether we have a mutual agreement to avoid double taxation. I don't know offhand. It's not my area of specialty, but I could easily find out. And anyone who wants to communicate with me, I can check that out for you very easily, actually.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and well, my question basically, based on your presentation, Christian, you indicated some areas in the EU that responded well to the COVID-19 and some that responded not so well. In your opinion, which countries in the EU do you think would be the easiest for Trinidad and Tobago goods and services producers to do business with, taking everything into consideration?
I would say probably today it's going to be probably Germany, and I think we have to continue to also develop with the UK, simply because we have historical ties, and and so whether the UK, it's a bit unfortunate that the UK is leaving the EU because it makes things a bit complicated. And is going to have an impact on the UK economy. But I think we have to continue to develop business there because it's always been, I think, probably the first market, our first export market, probably, or one of the most important ones. And so we should not count the UK out, even though they became an island again. You know, they're on their own, but they're still an important market. So I would say Germany, UK. I think France may be recovering relatively well. The Netherlands also. Yes.
Okay. And there's a question here. Who is Export TT's affiliates on the ground in Canada trying to marry opportunities? Export TT conducts research missions into territories of interest. So if you have a product and you would like to get information on the best market, including Canada, that is a conversation that we can certainly have with you. And in determining what's the best move, what's the best way forward for you, whether we need to hire a consultant in the market or hire Christian to go out and find opportunities for you. All right, so that's for Luke. We'd be happy to contact you and get some more information on that. We actually answered the question to Luke. Luke, I think we do have a withholding tax agreement.
Yes, I have. Okay, so if I could just call out the countries that we have double taxation treaties with: Canada, CARICOM, Brazil, China, Denmark, France, Germany, India, Italy, Luxembourg, Norway, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland, the UK, USA, and Venezuela.
Thank you very much, Vashti. Very efficient.
Yes.
Excellent.
All right, great. So I think we have come to the end of our session today. It's now 12 o'clock. Thank you so much for everyone who has taken the time to be part of this session. I don't know if any of our presenters would like to say any last words before we close.
Thank you very much, Deborah, for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. And I surely hope that you found this interesting, and I wish you all the best in your export endeavors, wherever you're going to go.
Thank you. Anyone else? Michelle, you're muted. Your mic is muted. Michelle?
Yes, I saw it. A little slower than you, Deborah. Just wanted to say thank you so very much for the invitation, Export TT, through Deborah. It's been wonderful, you know, working with these presenters with respect to delivering this particular webinar, and really happy to deliver the presentation today. And I'm looking forward to maybe some more collaboration going forward. Yes. So thanks again, Export TT, and thanks everyone for their attention.
Welcome. Michelle, Vashti?
I just want to echo the thanks from Christian and Michelle and say thanks to Export TT and thank you to all the participants in this session.
I would just like to conclude by thanking Deborah, Export TT. We have an ongoing relationship with Export TT, and thus far we have had some quick wins, and we look forward to this continued partnership. And it was a pleasure to work with Christian and Michelle. And Michelle Hustler has always been a friend of the TTCSI.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. thank you again to our participants for taking time out of your day to be with us. Please fill out our survey questionnaire, which will be administered after this session has ended. And feel free to indicate to us any other areas that you'd like us to cover. That being said, please remember to wash your hands, wear your masks, and stay safe.
Bye, everyone. Good luck to everyone.
Bye-bye. Take care.